In just the past 24 hours, the situation in Syria has unraveled. In an astounding turn, the Syrian Democratic Forces, who were allied with the U.S. in the fight against ISIS until just over a week ago, now have a deal with the Syrian government, a former enemy and an ally of Russia. This new alliance happened after President Trump ordered U.S. troops out of northern Syria, and Turkey swiftly moved in to attack the Kurds, their longtime enemy. Meantime, what the White House said was only going to be 50 to 100 special forces pulling out of northern Syria has now turned into a full withdrawal of the 1,000 or so service members who are participating in what, by almost all accounts, was a successful and low-risk operation to keep ISIS at bay. This withdrawal has halted the fight against ISIS. It's essentially wiped out the progress that American and Kurdish forces had made. We have our senior international correspondent, Nick Payton-Walsh, who is in Erbil, Iraq. And Nick, you've witnessed this. You were just in northern Syria. Tell us what happened.
It's been a startling 36 hours. The key thing to take away is how this has damaged U.S. standing in the region and potentially set the ISIS fight against ISIS back by 4, maybe 5 years if it continues at this rate. In the last 36 hours, we, at the beginning of that time, thought we were heading on a simple drive to the town of Kobani, near where there are a number of US troops stationed, but things deteriorated incredibly rapidly to the point where today we left Syria in something of a hurry. Here's what we saw.
Each dawn seems to bring seismic change in Syria now, yet the darkness never seems to end. This is Qamishli, once the Syrian Kurds' de facto capital, but now shuttered, empty, the internet partially off and drifting fast into Syrian regime hands. Every road, a story of people fleeing hatred, old or new, as land changes hands yet again.
Pretty much every road we've gone on so far this morning, we've heard either verified information or rumours that the Syrian regime is coming, that they're moving fast into Syrian Kurdish territory, kind of in a land grab after their political deal with the Syrian Kurdish leadership to seize as much territory as they can.
This is Tal Tamr, Kurdish, 24 hours ago, and Monday morning swarming with regime forces and residents who remembered what to say to them. I was hiding this picture of Bashar al-Assad, he says, and now I raise it with the return of the Syrian army, down with Turkish President Erdogan. The border was almost calm, yet we're told as we left, we're welcome back any time. But now we should run.
It's time, certainly, to leave. It's possible even this border post behind us, where there's a sense of panic about what comes next, may even be in Syrian regime hands, possibly in the days ahead.
24 hours earlier, we began a simple trip to Kobani, when it all collapsed. Gunfire, horror. The road blocked, though, by Syrian rebels supported by Turkey that a US official has said are mostly former ISIS and Al-Qaeda. An American convoy pulled out
jet.
And were quickly buzzed by a jet. And as we pulled back, Turkish military vehicles pulled up to the main highway. Turkey openly admitting it had taken a road most thought was far from their plan. It was a defining moment, isolating American forces here, and the US declared it was leaving.
We find ourselves as we have American forces likely caught between two opposing advancing armies, and it's a very untenable situation.
Yet those they abandoned continued to bleed. Turkey striking a convoy headed to the besieged border town of Ras Al Ain. Turkey long said it wanted to do this, but nobody guessed it would be this brutal. America long said it would leave Syrians behind one day, but nobody thought it would be so fast. And the regime long said they would retake as much of Syria as they could, but nobody thought the US would make it so easy for them and their Russian backers. 24 hours that changed how the world works, and 24 more hours in which Syrians bleed.
Remember, this all started with Donald Trump seemingly giving a bit of a green light to the Turkish moves back on Sunday. It's unravelled so quickly to the point now where the US, frankly, is no longer a player in what's happening in Syria. Yes, it could possibly punish Turkey through heavy sanctions, but Turkey seems so utterly focused on prosecuting this particular campaign here. They have released a lot of Syrian rebels who the US say are mostly extremists. One US official I spoke to, former ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and now it's the Russians and the regime moving towards those forces. It's unlikely they'll get into heavy clashes because their leaders seem to be reasonably able to sort things out, but it squeezes the Syrian Kurds potentially further, puts way more people on the move. And bear in mind here, we have a whole new chapter and potentially Turkish Syrian rebels on the ground who are just far too close to ISIS to even be considered people who could take them on. ISIS are going to benefit out of this. Back to you.
Nick Paton-Walsh, thank you for that report from inside northern Syria. I want to discuss this now with Gail Zmak-Lamond. She's contributing editor for Atlantic Media's Defense One. Gail, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So you've been to Syria 6 times in the last 2 years. You know, you have a lot of sources there. You know a lot of people there. What are they telling you?
There's a lot of concern. There is a great deal of fear. There is a lot of uncertainty about what comes next. These are the folks who fought alongside the United States in the fight against ISIS. More than 10,000 of them were killed as the ground force, while the U.S. really supported from the air and also with advisory capacity. And the question now is what comes next. I think that is on everybody's mind. You know, Brianna, the question of and then what has hung over U.S. policy in Syria for almost a decade now. And this latest turn is really how do we staunch a catastrophe that is really very much moving quickly and affecting moms, affecting dads, affecting people who had really enjoyed a very fragile but very real stability until last week.
President Trump has made this fight, and as he calls it, the defeat of ISIS, one of his success stories this year. Let's listen to some of what he said.
We have liberated virtually all of the territory from the grip of these bloodthirsty monsters. This was on election night. Everything read as ISIS. When I took it over, it was a mess. Now, on the bottom, that's the exact same. There is no red. We have decimated ISIS. We've captured, we defeated this group, 100% of the caliphate.
We took care of ISIS. We captured 100%.
We have totally defeated the ISIS caliphate.
So, I mean, you hear that now, but we just heard Nick Paton-Walsh's report that ISIS is going to benefit from this. What is this going to look like?
The president was correct. I mean, really, ISIS was at bay. I think there was absolutely no question about that. And the question is now, how do you turn this moment where Turkey has not kept its word on one thing that has been really asserted, right? It has gone well beyond, as Nick said in his report, what was supposed to be a security mechanism that Turkey pulled out of, that the United States had worked very hard to keep its NATO ally in. Then Turkey has shelled moms and dads in camps for the displaced or Turkish-backed forces, right? They have also there's video of people taking out of cars and being executed. So the question is, what does the United States do now? Because there was great pressure on the Islamic State. Turkey has actually even shelled a prison in Kamishli where people were guarding as members of ISIS who were being held prisoner there. And I wonder, you know, what are the consequences for that? And what does the U.S. do next to help those who kept the ISIS threat at bay really both stay alive and also figure out how to keep the extremist threat ended, because moms and dads who were on the front lines of this fight really were part of keeping this threat neutralized or at least under control.